Hello and welcome to Choralosophy Podcast, episode 60. Labels Won't Stick to Isaac Cates. This was a really fun episode, and I don't want you to be afraid at the length of the episode. In fact, the length of the episode is a strength of the episode. I had Isaac over to the home studio to start talking, and I think he and I could have talked all night. And I went back afterwards and looked at our 90-minute conversation, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to trim this down. This is going to be too long, but then I ended up only being able to sacrifice 30 seconds or so because it's just so interesting. And Isaac is an engaging character and just a fantastic musician. The topic of the episode, Labels Won't Stick to Isaac, is really just what it sounds like. We are so obsessed with labels in our society, and what kind of musician is Isaac? Well, as you're going to listen to throughout this conversation, that's a really hard question to answer. Classically trained pianist, gospel singer, gospel songwriter, singer-songwriter, choral clinician, world traveler, right? It's hard to pin down what Isaac is, and the metaphor for the larger choral community is that's exactly as it should be. So you're going to hear this conversation kind of wander from topics of the exclusion of Black music from our history curriculums for people who are my age and younger and older, but over the last 100 years, not learning about all of the music. We're going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to talk about how classical and gospel and choral and all of those different types of genres can actually coexist. We're going to talk about some great advice Isaac has for seeing some common humanity in all people. And one of the ways that we do that is through music. So it's just a fantastic conversation. On the way in, though, the Atlanta convention is coming up close. It's going to be about a month away from when this episode comes out, and there are still some spots left. It's starting to fill up kind of at the last minute as everybody gets vaccinated, but that's going to be an in-person, April 9 to 11. All you have to do to get signed up is go over to choralosophy.com/choralosophy-con. Really easy to find. There's also a Facebook group. Also, it is a great opportunity as we get set up for these returns to choir and returns to our ensembles with just things improving rapidly to grab some sheet music. So make sure you head over to graphitepublishing.com and ryanmain.com and find some awesome sheet music at a fingertip that you can just click and download and print, and you're ready to go. And plus, you can use Choralosophy at checkout over there. And as always, shout out to the Patreon producer level sponsors: Ulrika E. Grain, Munoz Alarcon, Chandler Smith, David Kowalczyk, James Mock, Kyle Peterson, Michael Herron, Ryan Main, Steve and Kathy Kakasa. So I have to tell you one of the worst dad jokes that I ever wrote, and it has to do with your shirt there.
Okay.
So I was trying to be funny, and I made a meme, and I found I googled an image of like a double container of salt, okay? And the meme was 2-pack shaker.
Oh.
It was really bad.
That's pretty
bad. I posted it to my choir kids, and they were like,
don't. Don't.
It's a 2-pack shaker.
And we're like,
it's not that funny.
It's not. It's bad. It's pretty bad.
One of my boys was like, you spent time making that?
Yeah.
I was like, yeah.
That's definitely dad joke worthy. Because, yeah. That's not the worst I've heard, though.
No, I get pretty bad with the puns.
Okay. You're punny. That's good to know.
Yeah.
Punny is good to know.
Right. I prefer groans to laughter, actually. To my jokes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I can see that.
Have you renewed your Sight Reading Factory membership yet this year for you and all of your students? If not, get started. It's not ever too late, in my opinion, to give your students the gift of confident literacy and the empowerment that brings. It's amazing what happens when you really start to see the growth and you see that confidence build in their eyes. You can always use Choralosophy at checkout to get 10% off your whole order. For a school's order, that's a big savings, and you can use that code every time you renew each school year. Well, of course, I should probably, since we're rolling, I should probably tell people that I'm here with Isaac Cates.
Hey,
and we're just chatting in the studio, and So Isaac, why don't you just go back a little bit further and just tell us, for the people that that might not know you, a little bit about your background. And if you could, I'd actually like you to go back further than most of our professional bios do. Little Isaac, what made you first become a musician? That's the first question I always ask people.
Little Isaac, well, West Philadelphia, born and raised.
On
the playground is where I spent most of my day. No, you know what? 4 years old. You know, I was a interesting kid. You know what? I was very, very average. The regular stuff. Love video games. Love Nintendo. Dating myself. Sega. All that stuff. Loved. But I was like a Renaissance kid, so I loved some of everything. I'm a creative too. So I loved drawing. I loved painting and that kind of thing. So my mother made me start studying piano at the age of 4. Absolutely detested it.
Oh.
Man, I wanted to be outside,
right,
and like breaking stuff and doing, but I had a gift for it. I could do that, and then I sung at church, and I discovered I could sing as well. And so that kind of led the interest. And it was not a choice. My mother could play piano, and not well. Just it was kind of like she was like country piano player. But my grandmother, her mother, was like supposedly like the best piano player in their little town of Mount Holly, which I mean that was like 400 people in Arkansas, southern part of Arkansas.
Yeah.
And so but was always musically inclined, and usually I just had a strong aptitude. So whatever it is, I put my mind to, with the exception of like math. Math has always been a struggle for me like that, But other than that, anything that had to do with geography or memorization or literacy or patterns or things of that nature, which of course math encompasses the pattern, but it came naturally to me. So music, they put me in piano lessons because they just kind of threw me into things, into whatever stuck. We would just see, and so I did not like it, but I stayed in it for a few years, long enough to do. Well, the fundamental things, and had a little Clementine Coulao and all the classical piano and all that stuff. Then eventually made it up to minuets and Bach and stuff. Mm-hmm. So by the time I was, I think maybe 10 years old, I talked my mother into letting me stop. Because I just was like, Mama, please. This is not how, she's like, oh, but you have a talent for it. I play recitals and stuff by then. But I stopped for maybe a year and a half. Maybe not that long. By the time I wasn't 12 yet. It was like maybe 11. Yeah. So I asked her again, can I have piano lessons? And she said, you've got to be kidding me. Because I never stopped playing. I never stopped working on my pieces,
I see.
My little things. Okay. I just started to noodle. And my ears started to kick in because I grew up in the black church experience. And so by then I was singing in the choir. And so I was like, well, why don't we sing the notes? The notes on the page are not what we're singing. So we don't sing the hymns like that. I'm looking and there's this chorale, style, 4 parts, and I'm like, we're not singing this. Everything we do is moving in parallel motion. I didn't say it that way, but I was like, I could make that correlation that this is not the same. So how can I merge these two? And so that's when it kind of started, was with ear. And so then I'd hear things on TV and the radio, and I could go and pick it up. And so she was like, if you do this, if we pay for this again for you, you are going to have to just go with it. And I said, okay. And I did it, and then never stopped. And so then I got really serious into it. And by then I started playing for the choirs at church, Metropolitan Baptist Temple, not the Washington Boulevard. Grew up there, which really nurtured a lot of my talents in music. And so I was able to sing and play, and at a very young age play for like the adult choir. And so it wasn't like the typical black church experience, in that the music director was a music teacher as well. So it wasn't like we were just doing everything off the radio or just gospel things. So we would do spirituals. We would do, you remember the Peterson cantatas? We did all that. We did that stuff. So I grew up around that. So I'm so grateful for that. And she was happy. She was kind of also my piano teacher as well. Okay. So that's kind of the formative thing that got that going. And then of course I went on and started playing at different churches, and went on.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm really interested in, just with everyone I talk to, and I don't even think this is a term, I might have just made this up, but is the musical psychology behind why we all do what we do.
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds like, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like there was a moment in your early childhood where you were playing the piano and you were getting okay at it, but you lost interest for a while. And then one of the things that sparked your interest was that you were starting to see parallels between what you were doing at church and some of the stuff maybe even in school or in your piano lessons, and you were starting to make connections
Yes.
between these things. And I find that fascinating because I think that, of course I'm a teacher, so I'm always thinking about like when I get a kid in my classroom, what are those musical psychology moments? Like why they chose music for some reason when they came to my class. What was that? And in most cases, it's something on their iPod.
Sure.
Or in their head, in their earbuds somewhere, like that got them interested in the concept of music, and then how do I help them connect those things?
Sure. Yeah.
And that's one of my favorite things to hear stories about. So that's awesome. So let's keep moving forward then. So then college happened. Like, what did you study then when you got to college?
Well, I was at UMKC, piano,
Uh-huh.
with Phoenix Park. I don't know if you remember her.
I don't.
Phoenix Park Kim. She's at one of the universities in Indiana now. Do you remember Nick Phillips? They were
Yes.
all DM. Yeah, so I were in their studio. And and then by then I was songwriting. I wrote my first song at the age of like 14. Was not very good. But I was really driven musically by that time, and so that was what I spent the majority of. And then of course I was in the choirs, there. But I kind of was like there, but always had my hands in other stuff. I really think I probably would have done better to not go to a school where I had to commute. Difficult thing for me was that I was still involved in the city way more than what a college student working on undergrad should have been doing. I mean, I was working on an album. I was playing at all these churches in Kansas City. I was paying from home, I mean, it was just a lot going on, and I never really immersed. So I was kind of in, and if I was just to be all the way honest, I'll just be honest. I did not care for. I liked my teachers. I liked the education and things, but I did not care for the place while I was there. I did not find it to be very diverse, welcoming. I mean, I was like one of 6 black people that was there, so I was always like in and out. Of course, I had my buddies, the Ben Gullies and the people. We're sitting in Ellswick and Ellswick. Shout out Dr. Ellswick. Shout out to you, Beth Ellswick. If you're still listening, you are amazing, and I love you dearly. And there were some amazing teachers that were there, and the professors and whatnot, and I got a great, wonderful foundation musically. But I knew that I didn't want to go the route in that realm, not that way. And so now, consequently, as a teacher now, a lot of times when I'm talking to students, I really try to encourage them to think about all of the different aspects that will involve your musical career, your interests, your talents, because you have a lot of options. You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't think I just really didn't. I was just kind of told, "Oh, that's what you need to do," and I was like, "Okay," as opposed to, I mean, there's so many different schools of music all around the nation that you can go to that have different styles pedagogically and different things if you're going to do commercial writing. And I think the thing for me, a traditional conservatory makes you an astute musician, which I think it does. I think there's a wonderful foundation, and the pathos and just the nuts and bolts and the deeper things of musically that I acquired through that. Phenomenal. But then you got to figure out how to make money after doing it. You got to figure out how to negotiate a contract. If you're not going to be going to the realm of education or working with a symphony, I don't like practicing 5-6 hours a day. So I mean, it was like, I mean, and even when you do, you learn this music, it's extremely difficult. And you got to keep your chops up, and it doesn't pay as well as you think until you get much older.
Right.
If then, and so. Just learning how to navigate some of those things, learning about publishing and like BMI and CSAC and ASCAP, and if I'm a Harry Fox agency and all these things that I learned about afterwards. And so, but while I was there, I also was when I started my group. Ordained is when that officially.
I didn't realize that was when you were a student. Okay.
I was when I was. I had a lot going on. And so, literally, we recorded our first album while I was there.
Oh, okay.
So thus
That's awesome.
the connection of us singing Lacrimosa, I was already immersed in all of these, studying so many different great choral works. So I mean, it was nothing to do. I think we did it while I was there. I'm pretty sure we did. I think at the time, of course, Robinson was, of course, still there. But I think it was Dr. Anderson was there. But I don't think we did that with him. I know we did the Requiem. I don't remember what year it was or whatever, but I'm sure we did the entire work. And so and I'd done it before. And so then you move Brahms Requiem and Missa Solemnis, Beethoven, all these different things. So I had all this great choral stuff. That's, I think, when I fell in love with choral music. I already loved it, but I think I fell in love with the idea of it because I was more of a symphony guy. I loved symphonic music more.
Interesting.
When I first got there.
Okay.
Yeah, Strauss's and Alpine Symphony changed my life.
Wow.
Oh, nothing better.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, that's a really great reflection. And I wonder too, by the way, I have an observation about UMKC. You mentioned earlier that you just didn't feel super welcoming on with the staff was great, but just the place. I had the same experience actually. Really? And I don't, and this is no shade against them because I agree that the staff was great. I think one of the things that I attributed it to at the time, and of course I'm a white guy, so it's not that I was the only white guy there. That's not the issue. But I attributed it to the fact that it was a commuter campus.
Yeah.
Nobody lives there.
Yeah.
So there's no on-campus life. And when there's no on-campus life, everyone's coming in just to get their classwork and get out there.
Exactly.
And so we didn't get, those of us us UMKC people didn't really get that traditional college experience where you maybe drink too much in the frat house or whatever. And and in a lot of ways, I kind of look back on that. I'm actually glad that I didn't because who knows what path I would have gone down if frat
for graduate studies it's great.
Yes,
for people who already got their families going, you got undergrad, I mean you already have a career going and you need to get in there, do that. You're not all about that element. But for undergrad, no, it's just
now there's campus life now.
Is it? Okay,
because they've built a ton of dorms.
I saw that.
It's
they tore down, was it Twin Oaks? And
and
the old,
all the nasty. They tore that out and, built in some new ones. So it's a much better situation now, but that's great. In fact, we were just starting to touch on Ordained, and since this is mostly people listening to this will be choir people, a good portion of my audience might know you from the ACDA performance with Ordained. So tell us a little bit more about that group and how you define it.
Yeah. Okay. So Ordained was started. I am a friend of mine, Anthony Harvey, who was a music ed major, and he teaches at a high school somewhere in Kansas City. He plays R&B music and things like that, but he was a music ed major there. One of the other few black students that was there, and we met there. And his mother is a phenomenal songwriter and singer, Elwanda, and so she ended up becoming a mentor of mine. And it was his idea, let's start a group. And I was like, because we were both songwriters doing gospel music. And I was like, I don't know. I mean, it wasn't a bad idea, but I wasn't sold on it. But then I just said, okay, yeah, why not? I don't have a deep story. I didn't go to the mountains and look to the hills for come with my help and meditate. There's nothing deep. He was like, let's do it. I was like, I don't know. He was like, you sure? I was like, okay. Literally, that was it. We started calling people. I wish we would have spent more time praying. Even the name, he named the group Ordained. St. James United Methodist Church. I was playing there at the time. Reverend Cleaver II, the congressman, was then the pastor. And I think we sat down and we were like, okay, we know we're going to have these singers. They're going to be different people. You call people you know, I'll call people I know. The people who I called were all colleagues and friends and worship leaders. Some of them sung jazz, some of them sang R&B, some of them whatever. And now it's the same way even to this day. And he called people he knew as well. And that was it. And I actually somehow I ended up getting the majority of the singers. They were all people that I knew. And most of them were the ones who stayed. And then Anthony ended up leaving the group eventually. He had a lot of things going on with his career and his family and kids and stuff. And I was like, okay. So now I've kind of inherited this group that was not my idea. It was his idea. And I always tell that story because you never know what God's setting up. You never know what's happening, And so I'm like, I'm left with this group that it was not my idea. And it was not originally Isaac Cates and Ordained. It was just Ordained. a singing ensemble. We would go to sing at churches, and people. Whoever's group it was, whoever knew the director. So we were co-directors, Anthony Harvey, Isaac Cates and Ordained. So if they would, Ordained would get up and they would say, "Well, Isaac is here. Isaac in this group Ordained." And whoever knew the person, if we went to church, they knew Anthony.
I see.
Anthony's group in Ordained. So we said, well, let's just go ahead and cut to the chase and put our names in front of it. Anthony Harvey, Isaac Cates.
If it's Anthony's grandpa's church, then it's Anthony.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So we said, well, let's just, for the sake of fairness, let's just say Anthony was a mess. Anthony Harvey, Isaac Cates and Ordained. All that mouthful. It was a mess, actually. And so we did that, and so we would go places, and still people would, so if more people tended to know me and some of the things that I do, so it would always be like Isaac's group. So and so it just stuck. And so after he left, of course, we just dropped it off, and that's how you get the name. And basically, we started the group. I wanted to sing my original music. I'm a songwriter. That's my first passion, is songwriting and arranging. I love that. And so I had these ideas. I had the idea just to do a rendition of the Lord's Prayer. I don't know. That was pulsy. That was in a minor mode, because you don't hear that a lot. And it was just something I had. And I was starting to have really, really, really interesting ideas. And music was just kind of coming naturally. I'm really big on the intrinsic sort of natural thing. When I arranged my rendition of the Lord's Prayer, I just looked at the words, "Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come." So, "Our Father." I said, okay, so what if we just gave a beat? "Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be," every syllable, gave it subdivision, okay. "Our Father, which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come." 5, 6, 1, 2. That's normal enough. I said, okay. And that's how that emerged. And that's how we ended up doing that. And so a lot of my arrangements were based out of when I was just naturally, the text I was doing, if it was a spiritual, if it was gospel stuff. I've always had my ears on a lot of stuff. And that was why I even agreed to do the group, was to birth my ideas. And so that's how it ended up happening. And we recorded our first album and released it in 2006. And we've been going ever since. We've toured Switzerland and shared. They've sung my music. We did a Christmas EP, and we're working on a live album now that we recorded several years ago. It's a compilation, actually, of stuff that hopefully will be out in the summer. And so, yeah, it's been 15 years now. Yeah.
That's awesome. So with when we heard the group at ACDA, we heard a program that was very eclectic, including the Lacrimosa, all the way to some things that we would, those of us whites, would think of as gospel.
Yeah.
Right. So is that typical of an ordained program, or were you doing like stuff because it's a choir convention that you wouldn't normally do? Does that make sense?
That's typical of an ordained concert.
That's cool.
That is, we are, which now you're really getting off into, for you choralosophy people. Chris he's piquing my interest, because now it gets into the conversation of, I just almost have felt like I never belonged in one area, because it's I take everything that we sing very seriously. When I was putting that program of music together, when we shared with Contorai and the men's chorus, and of course the Allegro, and when we all came together, I just wanted to give a snapshot of one of the things that we do, who I am, because I forget these people don't know who I am, and who we are in Kansas City. But then also to have a great opportunity to celebrate. I am a gospel musician as well. I mean, I don't ever forsake that. And I'm like, shoot, yeah, so we need to sing something of Andre Crouch. So I put together the two fathers of contemporary gospel music, are Andre Crouch and Edwin Hawkins. And so we did a medley, to mashup at the end of them. And then I wanted to do something that people could relate to, like a hymn. The hymn, Even Me, is in almost every hymnal. I mean, it's in the Methodist, it's in the Presbyterian, it's even Baptist. So I said, okay, we'll do a setting of that. And then we'll do, because, I mean, I'm gratuitous for myself and whatever. It's because I want to buy my albums eventually. So we'll do two of my things. And so it was too long, but that was how I came up with what we would sing. And I don't know, I just thought, so our concerts are typically like that. The difficult thing is, for me, working with singers who, many of them don't have the background that I have in music. Many of them some of them do. There are 2 or 3 of them who studied voice or piano, and many of ordained play piano, and there's 2 or 3 that have degrees in vocal. So yeah, they're pretty diverse, but most of them don't have that choral background.
Right. Okay.
So I remember when I first taught them the Lacrimosa back in 2006 or whatever. they were just being all weird, and I'm like, guys, people go sing it at like these little black churches, and in Pentecostal holiness churches, they think you're speaking in tongues. So I give the libretto, say lacrimosa dieci, and I give them the translation. Oh, hallelujah! I said, no, I'm not speaking in tongues, guys. It's not tongues. Thank you. I said, no, it's not. You didn't feel anything. That was not the Lord. That was just you totally misinterpreting. This is Latin, guys. This is like trust me. And so, and even then, it was difficult because I'm teaching them, and I fuss. I said, I want you to get the gravity of what the Requiem is, what this memorial is. I mean, just the Requiem in general, just the DC, not the Mozart situation with all the mystique and silly stuff, but just what it is, what is it, what we're honoring. And once I told them, they were like, oh. I said, heck yeah. It's serious in nature. Yeah. It's solemn. And they were like, and so the analogy that we picked, so we sing in Latin, and then we go in and we don't sing a translation. We sing the lyrics that I wrote. So it's inspired by the, mourn for the day the dust shall rise and guilty man is to be judged, that component of it. So I said, well, what if I wrote my own, this is my memorial song to my own way of thinking. What if I'm like, okay, God, I don't even know what you have for me in life. But whatever it is, I'm cool with it. That's literally the whole idea. So this is me singing my own figuratively. This is us singing our own memorial, our last rites memorial requiem for our way of thinking. And so that's what starts off, with that component, that sort of petition. And then it moves on to the parts that I wrote, where it says, come Holy Spirit and stay with me always. Within you, I'll remain, for in you I'm sustained. It's kind of, so that's the gospel component. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so, very strange. I did not think anyone would ever sing it. I never thought I'd have the tremendous privilege of singing it in front of, brilliant choral people like from all around the world. Mm-hmm. Nervous as all jacks. Because I don't want people to think, oh, he's butchering our Mozart that he didn't complete himself.
Right. Yeah.
But people go, well, you're gospelizing. I said, but in reality, I use the original content as inspiration for the song of my own. So that's literally, so it's more of an interpolation. And then I made it even more sacrilegious and went on in Tech Nine re-recorded it in 2000.
I didn't know that.
Yes, Tech Nine did it on his album, Full Circle Moment. He did it on his album Special Effects. I produced 4 songs on that album in 2016.
Okay.
And one of them was the Lacrimosa. He heard my version. So I had to teach him, sit down with Tech and say, well, first, before you listen to mine, this is the original. Listen to this is the purpose of it. So I got to teach Tech Nine this on the phone. And he was very engaged and wanted to know about it. And which he's very musical, by the way. He can sing. He sung in choir. But anyway, he was very engaged. And he wanted to do it as a memorial piece for his mother, who died from from lupus, which my mother died from lupus as well in 2011. So we actually used it in the way that it was intended, which was so interesting that this hardcore rapper would want to use my rendition, an interpolation of something that's based on something that's super choral. I mean, look at the 3 levels of, and so. That's a full circle moment. And I think that that led to the popularization of it. So before the choral community even knew about it, there are all these little tech fans or whatever that, oh man, Lacrimosa, I love that Lacrimosa. I said, okay. So that was just one of the things.
That's crazy. I love that. That's such a neat story. I've met Tech Nine. I met him
nice
in
guy,
I was 1997. He was not even really famous yet.
Yeah.
And I was standing in a line to get into a concert down in Westport, and he was just walking the line, passing out his demo CDs. And so we were all like, who's this guy? And we just kind of put it in our pocket, and I found it under the seat of my car a couple years later. By that point, he'd blown up by that point. Yeah. So it's pretty cool. Pretty cool Kansas City Tech Nine story. I can say officially that this is the first Tech Nine discussion on my podcast.
See, there we go. Already doing new things.
That's all right. We're breaking ground here. So I think you might have actually kind of touched on my next question anyway, because I was going to ask you how you, like, if you had to pick a kind of music that you would spend your time on. Let's say magically you could pay all your bills with a certain type of music. I'm just going to guess that you would say that there isn't a type of music.
It's so difficult because I really enjoy That is a great question. It's hard for me. It is really hard for me. I think because I've composed some classical music as well, I just am not confident about it at all. So I don't ever dare talk about it. I find ways to introduce little things, little elements of it, little motifs into some of my gospel music. That's my little punk way of sort of getting, testing the waters if people will like it. And I don't know if they do or don't. But I don't know. I think I know at heart I'm a songwriter. And I love the experience of seeing people, of evoking some sort of emotion from people through what we sing. So for me, it's difficult because I can go and listen to I don't know, it's crazy. I love Bobby McFerrin.
Oh, yeah.
Man, when he came into the Kaufman Center, it was just, and I was on a flight with him in 2019, but didn't get to meet him. I didn't want to be that weird person. And he was in the first class. But
I can top that. I peed at a urinal next to Ray Charles.
Okay, yeah, you win. Yeah.
His bodyguard, I still looked over at him at the urinal, and his bodyguard stepped in.
That is hilarious. Did he talk to you? Did you say
no? I was. You don't talk at urinals.
You don't.
That's bro code. But we were in the airport, and I just looked over, and of course you did the double take because I was like, I think that was Ray Charles. But then I had to go back and look again, and then the bodyguard got all suspicious, and so then
How did he know you were looking at him?
Well, it was Ray Charles. I was staring
But he's blind. How did he know?
No. Ray Charles didn't know.
Oh.
The bodyguard got suspicious and kind of just poked his head in.
Ray looks over at you. Hey, man, I see you. It's like, what? How did Ray know? Okay. That's
funny.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. So, okay, yeah, this makes sense. And what I think I'm hearing, and I think it's actually an awesome thing and it should be encouraged, is that you really feel like you're fish in the water when you are taking the elements, and this goes all the way back to your childhood story. That I'm not a licensed therapist, but it sounds like, I mean, the what really lights your fire is being able to find musical connections and put them together, almost like musical Legos.
Yeah.
It's like this, just because no one's put this together with this doesn't mean it can't happen.
Absolutely.
And that's awesome. And I actually think that I would prefer a world of music where more of that happened.
Yeah.
Because, and especially again, thinking back to my interest in this topic, which is my kids, my students at school, and what lights their brains on fire musically, and oftentimes they're gonna walk into my classroom with some kind of an influence that's, they're not coming in with a background knowledge of choral music, right? I'm gonna give that to them in class,
right.
But they're gonna bring their own different backgrounds and figuring out those ways to synthesize that.
And they keep you relevant, don't they?
Yeah.
Kids will.
Oh yeah.
I mean, and I won't lie. I teach private voice and piano, and they share a lot of artists, and I just wish they didn't sometimes. But a lot of times, I find some really great gems in some of the people that they listen to. Some of the it's not all junk. A lot of it is, but I mean, some of them have incredibly. It's just cool to get insight, you know what I mean, about what they're listening to, because I think that helps you teach them, right?
Yeah,
for
sure.
You get in their minds and see what that doesn't mean that you change your program or anything. I think they appreciate that when you at least listen. And I think that's just a human nature thing. They, here, this is what I like. Even if I listen, sometimes I just blink. They let me hear, oh, here's a great singer. And I listen, I'm like, okay. I'm like, if you like it, and... I don't ever down on one, but I think that's great. I love that reciprocity that happens of us sharing, that element.
Yeah, absolutely. So, can a choir buy Isaac Cates arrangements sheet music?
Some of them, yeah, they can. They can definitely get the Lacrimosa. It's self-published right now.
Okay.
Through they just have to reach out. If they email Isaac Cates Publishing, Isaac Cates ISAACCATES Publishing @gmail.com. They can reach out, and it's a lady there that runs. Sort of, we're working on my store right now. My website should be up. It's being updated.
Okay.
IsaacCatesMusic.com. To where they'll be able to go and get that. My arrangement of the Carol of the Bells that I did randomly a couple of years ago, which Test for shared it on Choir Buzz, and like 1 million views later, and people started buying it. It's hilarious. But that is available. That's actually published through J.W. Pepper.
Okay.
Mark Hayes was instrumental in making that happen. So, but yeah, they can. But the majority of my original things are the more flavorful things, if you will. A lot of my original music, there is sheet music. Some of it's just lead sheet. Because I'm a songwriter, so some things are a lead sheet with a melodic line with some harmonies and the chords. Lacrimosa is actually through scored though. I mean, it's a whole score for that because it's SATB with a divisi at the end. So yeah, they can. Yeah, we're working on it.
Okay. Yeah, and I can put links to all that in the show notes so that people can see it, whether they check out this episode now or 6 months from now or whatever.
Awesome.
They'll be able to find that. So it sounds like if there's a few things that are sheet musicable, not a word, then your typical process, is it not sheet music? Do you do it all at the piano? Like, is this all happening in your head? Tell us about like how you actually create an arrangement. What's the steps?
It's, you know what, it's different depending on what I am doing. Because Ordained, a lot of them do not. Most of them. Some of them read music, but most of them probably don't read as they're not as fluent with it as I am. Some of them, which is kind of my bad. I should have spent more time. I've always been them. They've been my guinea pigs. It started off as a gospel group, and I was like, I don't have time to teach you how to read notes. Here, just sing. This is what I want. And so because I'm a singer as well, it's so much of it is in the Black tradition of by rote. Although a lot of the things I come up with musically, it's harder. It's not just, tertiary sort of 3-part harmony moving in parallels. It splits and it's stuff. It's clustering and stuff, and it can be challenging. So it depends. Sometimes I will put a score in front of them. Depends on what we're working on. But usually the stuff that's new, because they get it before I've even. I'm old school. Before I even get to finale or Sibelius or anything like that, I either will just write down a chart with some part harmonies, or I'll just get staff paper and I'll write it in my handwritten calligraphy. I find that to be easy sometimes and faster for me. It's ugly and a mess sometimes, and when I get to my engravers, they're looking like, Isaac, really? And so which it can be difficult sometimes because I'm not very good with okay with finale, but I'm not like a whiz with that. Not like composers that do that all the time.
Right.
I kind of want to get to the music really fast. So, but my calligraphy is pretty good, actually. So it's playable. I mean, we've had studio sessions where string players have had to come in. Almost every string session we've ever done, I wrote it by hand. And so that's it's a weird. And then the singers, I write their parts sometimes too by hand. And then a lot of times they don't get a part at all. And I just tell them, take out your recorders, sing this because I just wrote this like last week or yesterday. Yeah. And so they are my guinea pigs as well. And so they've seen every iteration of my music before it. I mean, they do my demos. Or I'll demo it first, or it'll start with just a voice note on my phone. And then if I like the voice note, when I listen back to it, I'll say, I like that melody, let me write it down. And I will write the melodic line down long before I put chords to it or anything like that. I'll just, if there's a melody or a counter melody, if there are embers, if there's like a spark that's there and I feel it as a writer, yeah, that's good. Or that's something. Even if it's not good, it's not nothing. You know what I mean? And so that's kind of how I treat it. And so with my arrangements, yeah, I mean, it's a hodgepodge of mess sometimes when you look at it because it's papers and sometimes it's stuff I've scratched down and I've written through it and that kind of thing. And so, and then some things, I do tend to write everything down, believe it or not, actually, though. I let them embellish. Sometimes I let them riff. And, if they hear a major, second, or a minor, something like they hear something with the chord progressions. But I'm usually really funny about that, too. I don't let them do it a lot. Most of what they sing, I teach them every note that I want, just about. I mean, so it's very particular. It's like organized chaos.
Isaac Cates, control freak.
It's sort of, yeah. If they were here, Ordained would say yes. They would say, because I'm like, it's so weird. I mean, because you know what? If in the choral world, you'd have a score that's just extremely particular. It's written out, everything you prepared beforehand. So I use some of those elements still, but it doesn't work because I don't have a group that does that sort of thing.
Right.
You get what I'm saying?
Oh,
So
yeah.
I've had to adapt it. You know what I mean? But then I have my black tradition of we sing everything by rote, so I can just sing it real quick by rote, and they're gonna get it. So it's a very fascinating mashup.
Yeah, I'm fascinated just thinking about how many musical elements must be at play doing what you do. Because yeah, I mean, there's just it even sounds like yes, you've got the classical background, you've got the Black Gospel Church tradition of music, but there's also, it sounds like, some just kind of commercial music aspects to it. Like I'm almost picturing you working in a studio, like if you were working with a rock band, it would be a very similar kind of a thing.
Yes.
It's just that instead of the rock band, you've got singers that are we're just trying to work this together, and some of it might be different by the end of the recording session than it was supposed to be, but it works out.
We just did. What did we just do? Oh, we just did. We sung at the International Folk Alliance conference. It's going on right now in Kansas City, similar to what we did with ACDA. Once again, a brand new audience for me. Like ACDA, that was a brand new audience. I was familiar with ACDA. I'd never been. I was familiar with so many of the composers because, like, I'm a fan of a lot of,
Right.
we Dan Forrest and Michael McGlynn walking around, and I'm like, I know all these guys' music. Who's become my buddy now? Hey, Mike. But like that's. Yeah, for me, it was a new world, and so we did the same thing virtually just this week with the Folk Alliance, and so it's so fun you should mention that, the musicality, and we did an unplugged sort of thing around the piano, and the guitar player Bo Bledsoe, he was like, "Yeah, Isaac," I asked him to play one of the songs of my original songs, and right before we taped it, he was like, "Okay, yeah, do you have the sheet music?" I said, "I can text it to you. I can Dropbox it to you real quick." He said, "Well, I'm running the camera and stuff. I don't have time to." He said, "Can you write it up?" It's an easy song. And so here I am writing the chart for my song. About 11 minutes. I just wrote it real quick. He played it right there. I don't know that we really rehearsed it either. He played it exactly as I wrote it. I mean,
he's a true pro, though.
He's incredible.
I know Bo, yeah.
Well, Bo is he's played on my new album too. He played Oud on my new album.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a song that I utilize some Middle Eastern sounds. I have a Hanun layer. I have the Oud. I have a Dabruka on there. So it's I wanted to play with some of those sounds on the new track, and so I reached out to him, and he played it. And Bo is brilliant.
Yeah.
He read my chicken scratch and played it like we were getting ready to do a live recording. Yeah, it was phenomenal. So I say all that to say, yeah, it is. There's a lot of musicality. Alex, I don't think about it because and I will say that's why I'm thankful to you and KC and places like that, because I could not wedge into all these different places.
One of the things you might not be aware of is that the Choralosophy podcast is entirely listener supported. The content I produce here is free and will stay free. And the way I keep myself solvent and keep the show running is having listeners who I depend on and appreciate dramatically helping out. Of course, using the promo code at the affiliates is hugely helpful. But if you want to be more directly involved with helping the underwriting of the costs of the show, you can do that at Patreon. Patreon.com/Choralosophy. Patreon is just a website that allows membership by voluntary monthly payment to help support a creator of content like myself. So you can go to patreon.com/Choralosophy and get in the door over there for as little as $3 a month. $3 a month will get you access to the private podcast feed. Once a month, I do some behind-the-scenes episodes that go right into your podcast player alongside the main show, as well as lesson plans, any other types of materials I create along the way for my classroom. I might dump them there, as well as advance notice of who's going to be on the show before the rest of the audience finds out, which means that you can kind of feed me questions of things you'd like to hear me talk about with that guest as they are signing up to come on the show. So head over to Patreon. If you support the efforts of the show and the mission of the show, that's a great way to help out. Okay, well, if it's okay, let's zoom out and get a little bit meta. Okay. So we've talked kind of about how hard it is, or how hard it would be for you to put a musical label on either Isaac Cates or a musical label on Ordained, because it's intentionally this hodgepodge of different things, right? So saying Isaac Cates, the piano player, well, that would be not enough. Like that wouldn't describe it. Isaac Cates, the gospel musician. That's not really accurate either. Isaac Cates, the classical musician, not really accurate. So the concept of labels, even beyond just the music, what do you think about the way we tend to want to label each other all the time? Like, why is this such a hard conversation?
It's extremely narrow, and I get the functionality sometimes of it when you talk about vocation or career path. There's a lot. There is, there's purpose in it in times. But then sometimes we just do it because you want to have something to call something to liken it to, and to restrict it down to something. And I think that is a bad habit.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is a bad habit. Sometimes people just want to be a musician. You know what I mean? We just lost Chick Corea. This phenomenal jazz pianist, especially in the contemporary era. But of course, he was connected to like Miles Davis and stuff. He was a phenomenal classical musician as well. You know what I mean? To listen to him play Bach was sweet. Oscar Peterson, my favorite jazz pianist, and phenomenal. He's Canadian. He was incredible. His chops were otherworldly. But I mean, you could listen to him play Chopin just beautifully, and you would hear no influence of jazz. You would not know this is a jazz pianist. His interpretation, he learned it, and it's like, and so I'm like, he's just a piano. Yeah, the thing that he got famous for is that, but he could have gone in any direction. And I just think we should be careful with labels. With that, I'm not a big. Like I said, I see the necessity in them in some avenues and arenas, but I think we're musicians. You know what I mean? And who, and then you can have parentheses that do this or a specialty area of that. You know what I'm saying? You know, because I get it. So like you study medicine, you have internal medicine people that just can, or general practitioner, and then you have specialty fields from there. You may have a nephrologist or whatever, but they all still know the basic nuts and bolts of human anatomy.
Right.
You see what I'm saying?
They're all doctors.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Right.
that's what, and I'm like, and I get it. And then they will tell you, well, this is my specialty area.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's common. I think it's very normal and healthy to have an area of specialty. I think that's a good thing. But I'm saying that not every single person fits into that mode.
Yeah.
Not everyone, and you may not fit into that mode the duration of your career or life.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
You may decide to learn another style. Aretha Franklin, her taking voice lessons was hilarious. Your videos of her singing Nessun Dorma, and I was like, oh man, it wasn't classical at all, but it's still Aretha singing it. The fact that she appreciated it enough to study a little bit of classical voice and piano, I think that's amazing, man.
Yeah.
She didn't need it. Her career was made as the Queen of Soul. Mm-hmm. And so, and when they would interview her, they'd be like, what? You singing an aria? And she's like, yeah, can I sing an aria?
Yeah. Yeah, I think my thoughts on, just labels as just a general concept, oftentimes are shackles on the way we think about ourselves, but they're usually placed on us by other people.
Yes.
In other words, and I think when we were communicating via text or Facebook Messenger, or whatever, we were writing back and forth before we were talking, one of the comments you made, which I found really interesting, was that people tend to label you by whatever the first exposure is to you. And that makes total sense. I can identify with that too. Even if I could just be really simple with this explanation or with this example, but obviously my kids for the rest of their life are going to label me as dad. Mm-hmm. My students will label me as their choir teacher because that's how we met.
Sure.
And these aren't necessarily harmful. That's not harmful, but what it happens sometimes it starts to put boxes around what we think we can be.
Yes.
Right. And so to go even a little bit more meta, I think about things like, when we start to attach labels like, even like political labels, like, oh, I'm a conservative, I'm a liberal. Well, what does that mean to you? Because conservative means one thing to one person, means a different thing to another person.
Sure.
And in a different country, the liberal means something different than it means here.
Right.
Right. So I think that my thought about it is that we use the label, like you said, as a way to, you got to communicate in some way. You've got to be able to call something so that you can start the conversation. As long as we remain flexible, intellectually flexible.
That's the key.
With how that affects our output. Right.
Yes.
So just because someone met Isaac as a piano player, doesn't mean that the next time they interact has to be so that Isaac plays the piano and that I sing, or whatever. Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely, because it's just interesting. In Kansas City, many people know me as a pianist. In Europe, they know me more of a singer. I do more singing and a choir clinician. Because gospel choir, for some odd reason, is huge.
Oh, they love it over there.
They have enormous choirs too, like hundreds of people, festivals, and like shout out to people in Europe, y'all are wonderful. But every time I go to Italy, I mean, just before the pandemic, Torino and Varese, and then I did Australia, and then I did Madrid, Spain. I mean, so all these places I never would have thought would have been open or available to me. And once because their country sizes, their countries are akin to our states, it's nothing for you to go over there. And I do a workshop in Torino, Italy, and then the leader from a huge organization from Sweden, from Stockholm, comes in to sit in my presentation with 200 singers, and he's like, "I want you at the Stockholm Gospel Festival." I'm like, "Okay," and so that's opened up. But over there, they know me as a clinician. I'll play when I'm teaching or whatever, or when I start. At some point, I will, but I'm there like singing more often than not. And they actually wouldn't bring me if it was just playing. I mean, they don't need a black dude playing classical music. I mean, they own that, So I mean, like, I mean, I never forget doing a workshop in Leipzig. I mean, and I got to go to the Bach Museum. Bach Fest was going on while I was there. And I was there doing a gospel thing. And they were so impressed that they brought me there to do gospel music, but I was geeked out about seeing St. Thomas Church and seeing where Bach debuted his Passions. And so they set some stuff up because they were like, "You are very different in that way." I even use it in my teaching. Teaching gospel music, so much of it, you're navigating through the speech, of course, isn't their first, English isn't their first language. And so you're navigating through the accents and, all the weird things that we have that they don't. And I was telling them basically the oral tradition, y'all just do what I say, do me. I'll teach you singing what and I said, let me tell you why. Let me give you context, because we're singing gospel music, which is an Americanized art form. I said, so if we were singing German Lieder, I said, so for instance, if we saw the name Wagner in America, and if they didn't study music or don't know Germanic pronunciation, we just say Wagner. They all laughed. Oh, what? I said, now at the count of three, everybody pronounce it. 1, 2, 3, goes Wagner. I said, exactly. I said, which one is right? He said, Wagner. I said, why? He was from here. I said, exactly.
Yeah.
I said,
right.
So I know that. This is me educating you. And they were like, oh. And I said, and I think it was just interesting, the fact that I had such great respect for their culture, for their, Bach, of course, I mean,
he's all right.
Yeah, I mean, he's all right, but, and I was geeked, to be able to, and so to think that was able to feed that other side of me, even though I was able to do something completely different. And so, yeah, you're right. When they meet me in different places and other places, they know me as a composer, know. We debuted one of my pieces with the St. Louis Symphony Orchestra, Kevin Macbeth, 40th year celebration of the Robert Ray Gospel Mass. Man, to even meet Robert Ray was so cool, Professor Ray, because we've all sung that. We've seen that black book with the white letters and whatever. I mean, I remember being a kid seeing that thing, and we've all sung the acclamation or something from it or whatever. We all love the, what's the one? Is it the Kyrie? I forget which one it is that everyone likes, but it's the whole thing is very accessible. I mean, it's real 70s-ish, but the sound of it, but it's the first work of its type, right. And it's a ping. And so to share a program with him, it was overwhelming. I didn't sing one note. I didn't play the piano. I sat up in the mezzanine and cried. I never cry at my music, but I was like, original song that I wrote, then composed, and then with Jonathan started orchestrated, being debuted with a world-class symphony, on the same program with a history. And then, of course, at ACDA, I played the Robert Ray Mass when they did. It was after the Legacy concert, I think.
Yeah, yep, I know what you're talking about.
I played that for, and then Dr. Andre Thomas is sitting out in the audience, and what I did not know is he played the debut of it. I was mortified when he told me that. I was like, no! And at first I was excited, and I'm like, no! You listen to me play. Adding stuff. And he was like, oh, Dr. Thomas is so encouraging. Oh, Isaac. Oh, it was marvelous what I heard. I said, play, Isaac. He was just great. Just the most encouraging. I love Andre Thomas. Dr. Andre Thomas is just, he's the GOAT to me. And not just because of what he's done for music education. I'm going on a long tangent, but just who he is as a person, and how encouraging he is. And so in that situation, I was a pianist. And so, and I think everybody can be there, because think about it. You're Chris the singer as well. You're also a group leader. That you have your. I mean, some people have so many other. I like Craig Hella Johnson.
Yeah, it's a great name. Yeah,
brilliant.
Yeah,
I mean, first of all, his voice. He got a beautiful singing voice.
I've never heard him sing.
Oh man,
that's great.
You know his "Will There Really Be a Morning"?
Oh yeah.
Go look up a video of him singing it and playing it live.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll check that out.
It's beautiful. And I don't know if it's, what's the name of his choir?
That's Conspirare, right?
Conspirare, yes. Yeah. Go listen to him do that, and it will and I was like, a beautiful pianist, and I was just kind of like, okay, you can do everything, So I say that to say we never know. Olayelo, we know his compositions.
Yeah. His
crazy kind of orchestral things he likes to do with voice, but then he's mad skills ad-libbing on the piano.
Yeah, brilliant player.
So I think I like that. I love to. I mean, how I meet you is one thing, but and then to go further, better, I kind of want to know who you are. You know what I mean? What is your philosophy, and why do you sing? Why do you play? Well, I love listening to composers talk about. Songwriters talk about what their muse is, what their inspiration is, where does it come from, what's behind it. I don't ever want to hear someone sing or play just because they can.
Yeah. What does it mean to you?
Right. Yeah. That's the worst. And we teach this to our kids, right? Yep. And I'm like, and we run into that a lot in gospel music. Unfortunately, I can say this, is that there's so much skill and talent, but there's very little heart sometimes. Sometimes there's, but when there's passion, it's a lot of it.
Yeah.
But the newer generation, they can sing so well. And I'm like, okay, but don't sing at me. Don't play at me, that is the biggest turnoff to me. I don't care how cerebral. It can be thick, you know what I mean? But whatever.
How many C's in thick on that one? Is that with four?
I was going to say three.
Three
C's?
Okay.
Yeah, right. I mean, it could be, but meet me here. Tell me what it is. Let me feel. And that is my thing. That is my thing with because I feel like as musicians, our biggest responsibility is to communicate. I really think that is, that's if it's text, if it's an emotion, if it's a people, if it's a culture, if it's a story, if it's an idea, whatever it is, I just don't think it should just be there and you not intend to leave people with something. It's not elevator ancillary just in the background.
Yeah, that's I totally agree. I agree with all that. I have my interest got piqued a little while ago when you were telling the story of the of your gospel festivals that you've done in Europe.
Yeah.
So I have a question about that. I'm assuming that because you do those and you enjoy them, that is just the times we live in, I guess, spark this question. But why is that not cultural appropriation?
Why is it?
I mean, I'm assuming you think it's not, or else you wouldn't go do it. So, but I can think of people that would probably say it is.
Yeah.
So, how do you think of that?
Well, I think you need to know the history of in these situations of gospel music. It's a younger thing. So a lot of their quote unquote legends, who are the forerunners of it, are still alive. Yeah, I think that's a big piece of it. And they are, in many cases, it's an art form. They appreciate the art of it because many of them are not believers. A lot of them come from from a Catholicism, and they abandon that or anything or nothing at all. Many of them are not believers. When you share, they just like the music.
Yeah.
And so I think because there is and usually the things that I go to, I'm not the first one. There's usually a legacy. There are people who've forerun something before me, and they've gone over, and I don't look at it any differently than, for instance, I talked about Dr. Thomas earlier, or any black conductor who goes, Rollo Dilworth, anybody that goes to do statewide situations. Dr. Thomas has done that on a national and international. Like he's one of the few that's actually done that over there, and it's no different from that. It's a whole festival, and so I look at it as an educational component. They enjoy the artistry side of it, because when I go over there, I am a clinician, but I'm also an artist. Like I say, I'm big. I'm big in Europe, whatever. Get a T-shirt. I'm big in Europe. No, I mean, but they literally. I see why so many artists say, "Buy states, peace," and they go to Africa or what. Stevie Wonder just said he's relocating to Ghana or something like that. I think I saw that online. He said he's getting ready to retire there, or maybe not retire, but live there. And Tina Turner. I mean, I get why there's just such a great appreciation. And so until you, I guess, are in it and have done more than just one, like when you've actually gotten and I don't mean just go and you do a booked-in situation and then you out. Because there's that too. There's a tour, because I think maybe the appropriation part may come during the Christmas season, because gospel Christmas tours are a big thing. And because you have yourself a group and whatnot, they will bring you would play the biggest concert halls if you get the right promoter, and you can get the connection in, and they pay really well and stuff too. But the stuff that I do, a lot of the events that I do are close to 3 to 4 to 5 days long. So there's a whole thing where I'm either working with the soloists and or I'm teaching kind of my Isaac choral approach to doing whatever, or they know my music, and so they're bringing me, and I'm sharing with them not just as an artist, but I'm also giving them some nuggets of how to sing the music and a bit of the background, and so and then there's just my side where there's a missionary side too. Because I'm also a music missionary, so I've done some trips as well where I didn't pay. I didn't get paid. I actually paid to go over there. Now it's to the point where now I don't do as many of those because I'm almost always booked over there now. But I still try to find time to seed into it as well.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I feel like my answer to that type of question is usually pretty simple, and maybe it's too simple. I don't know, but I feel like music at a fundamental level, like you said earlier, we're musicians, and I think music is for everybody.
Right.
It's for everybody. To me, where it crosses the line is into what should be, I feel like, kind of obvious, which is that someone who is engaging in a music making without respecting it, using it as a party trick,
right?
That kind of thing. And if you, as the expert in the gospel expert in the room, goes to one of these festivals and you get the sense that you're there because they respect it and they want to bring an expert in to talk about it. To me, there's nothing wrong with that.
No,
you got to do it. That's how music lives. It should be done. That's how music lives.
It is the most wholesome thing. And it isn't until people walk up to you afterwards. I think especially for the gospel thing, because it's not so cerebral-minded as well, for many reasons. But I mean, like you go, and it's so emotional for so many of them, and I've lost track. They walk up to me with tears in their eyes, and they can't even speak English with others. I feel when you sing, or when we sing, or I'm not even a Christian, but you believe this, don't you? Or I am a Christian and I feel isolated over here. Or then there's the interpersonal human connections. My wife just died from cancer, and you sharing this music, it's helping me now. I mean, like it's way bigger than just the, what I mean? Those are the moments I will never forget. Just will never. There was I did a workshop in Puglia, Martina Franca, which is the southern part of Italy, and just gorgeous. And there was a little girl that was a part of this big kind of community thing that they did, and they did a thing. Some of them sung, some of them were singers, some of them was the first time they were singing. So first time singers singing gospel music, it's can be rough, and it's a different language. So the hardest thing you got to get them to not do is blow their voices, because it seems so shouty to them, and it's like, oh, please don't, like please, guys. And so, but I'll never forget. There's this little girl, and she gets up and she tells me. I told the story about one of my songs that I wrote, which I wrote right before my mother passed. And she's cried. She stood. She had to translate. The translator, and she said, "Oh my God, the story about your mother makes my heart hurt." And she said, and she asked Rachel, "Can I give Isaac a hug?" And I said, "Yes, you can." And then they tell me afterwards that she had some very rare form of I don't know if it was like how some. What is it, type 1 diabetes, where the children have
that? I'm not sure which type it is, but I know what
they're
you're talking
born
about.
with it,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
and her prognosis wasn't good,
Right.
and so I don't even know if she's still alive to this day, actually. But I just remember that. I will never forget that, and I just won't forget that.
That's beautiful.
Little moments like that make it so worth it, and so those are the connecting components to that sort of thing. And so when I go, I'm really stickler about I don't just want you to fly me over here all these hours on this airplane for me to just walk out and wave my hands and play real good or sing real good and everyone applaud and then I just dip out, there's a part of me that's that ambivert other side of me, which I don't want them all over me, but I put that aside because these people care.
Yeah.
They're not looking for any agenda. They're not looking for me to write something for them for free or do something or weird, whatever. I mean, almost always it's really, 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 really legit and wholesome. Yeah. And it's just touched my heart doing that because it's not a music that they have. They don't have that. So keeping in mind, it's the funniest thing that their indigenous music are the great, especially in Europe, are the great composers that we study in classical music. And that's great, but they look to American culture and they're like, okay, yeah, but y'all have rock and roll. You have jazz, you have blues, you have gospel. That's what we want. And that's another.
The grass is always greener on the other side.
Always that. It is always, you know what I mean? It is always that. I mean, and so it's fascinating. It's really, really fascinating, that element, to go and to connect with people in that way.
Yeah. I went on a choir tour once, Eastern Europe, and it was a UMKC choir, actually, with Dr. Anderson. And there was a choir in the church. After one of our performances, they had come to hear us, and it was a Polish, teenage gospel choir. And they came up to us afterwards, and they begged to sing for us. Because, of course, we're Americans, and gospel is American. Of course, we're all super white. But in their mind, we're Americans, and gospel's American.
Sure.
And they wanted us to hear that they could sing gospel.
Absolutely.
And we were like, great, line it up. And, of course, we don't really know. We're not gospelly trained. Is that
gospelly trained. I've been gospelized.
Right. But at the same time, it is a style that, at the very least, even white Americans are familiar with because we see it, we hear it, we're around it. Even if I wasn't raised in the church in singing that way, I can recognize it right away. I recognize when it sounds authentic, and of course, it didn't sound authentic because they were Polish. It was only whatever. But it was really amazing just to see how badly they wanted to share with us.
Yeah.
How badly they wanted to connect with us, and they wanted our validation after they were done. And of course, we gave it to them. Deep down in my mind, I was thinking, "Oh my God, that's really, really square." But of course, I didn't say that. Of course, I was very nice and all that. So it is, and it's an amazing thing because we don't when we share each other's musical cultures, we don't always get it right.
Right.
We don't always do it authentically. In fact, it's very hard. Would take years.
It does
to do that.
That's a whole.
But we still got to try. We still got to try to share.
Well, as the gospel music, I will say, it is coming further. It is being canonized. Now, all of a sudden, we're starting to get great curriculum. We're starting to get some scholars. I mean, there's a written side aspect that is coming, and you're getting in these wonderful musicians like the Brandon Waddleses, who can just extrapolate from every genre, and not even and even as a black man, I must say, I'm glad changes are happening. More need to happen. I don't know how all that time in UMKC, I never heard the name William Grant Still.
Yeah.
Florence Price, Margaret Bonds. It didn't come. I mean, and now we're not even talking about idiomatic music. We're
Right.
talking about You're talking about classical.
Yeah.
Or Nathaniel Day. It doesn't. And that's not a UMKC. That is just a curriculum thing. That is the way things have been.
That's international.
Exactly.
With classical music tradition, yeah.
And it's robbery.
Yeah.
It is and I'm glad that changes are starting to come. And even with stuff like, with the style, like gospel, that I think the thing that's difficult for me is that gospel music, so much of it can be traced. It's not that old.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, black singing is very old. We're talking about 400 years, but we're talking about gospel music from like let's say the Great Migration, 1916, when it actually popularized and became the same thing that gave birth to the Harlem Renaissance and all these the migration northward. That is traceable. That's trackable, and the crap needs to be cut. Like that, that needs to be taught. And I'm glad the conversations are happening now. I'm glad the things that have been. I hate that we had to go through and what we're having to go through, and I hate that, the things that we've lived through in 2020, the George Floyd, all the things that we've always had. But I love that now, all of a sudden, I love that Black composers and clinicians and just the culture is at least being honored and acknowledged.
Right.
That is a big thing.
Yeah. Now, of course, I think it's obvious to anyone listening why that would be a big deal to you.
Yes.
It's kind of hard to explain as a white person why that's also a big deal to me. Mm-hmm. And so I'll try. I grew up, I'm 41, so I grew up in the 80s and 90s when the idea, of course, I didn't know at the time, but you mentioned robbery, robbery of a culture being taught, right? Well, I kind of feel robbed too, in the sense that I never got to read books where the main character was a black person. Mm-hmm. And that's actually, I do think that's harmful to white people too.
Sure.
Because it causes you to start to center your own self as the protagonist in all situations.
Yes.
Right? And so I know, I even think about are you familiar with the New York Times 1619 Project thing? The kind of the telling of the American history, but from a black perspective.
Not that one as much, no. Okay.
It's been this big project for the last 3 years, really, okay. and it's, I think, they publish it through their New York Times magazine, not the newspaper, but okay. And there's podcasts about it and stuff. And there's actually a lot of controversy around that project in terms of some of the things being, is this politically active or is this accurate history? And there's probably reality is there's some of both going on. But what I appreciated about it, even if there were something that I thought, I'm not sure if that's an accurate way of telling the story, but what I appreciated about it was that I got to hear the stories of American history from the first person perspective of a black person.
Okay.
Even written, for example, they went back and found letters of a black woman writing to her children after they'd been separated. I was never given that perspective.
Yeah, no.
I was taught about what happened to black people from the white perspective.
Yes.
But I was never put in that position to because when you read someone's firsthand stuff, you start to become that person.
Yes.
And I think that's what's missing. And I agree. I think
it was deliberately taken out. I mean, it was deliberately,
for sure.
So it's certainly not. It's not that our generation's fault because you don't. I mean, you look up, and I talk to people that have completed DMAs, but they're like, I've never heard. And I'm seeing that all over the brilliant musical who are not racist. I'm talking about white people who are like, if I knew the music even existed, I would have, you know what I mean? And then you don't even know that you don't know because it just so little of it, so much of it has been intentionally squelched.
Yep.
And there are some pretty nefarious mindsets that were at play that are now trying to be done away with, which I think is starting. Yeah. I really do believe, because that's what's the most important thing is not just black people championing the work, but white people as well. And not because it's black people, Well, because it's good music.
Right. Exactly.
Like
at the core of it.
That's the main thing.
At the core of it, that's what it has to be about.
That's the main thing.
And I agree. And I think there probably along the way have been nefarious things going on too. Although I would say it doesn't even require that. It sometimes requires just, I was taught by my teacher, who was taught by his teacher, and he didn't know. I don't know because he didn't know, and he didn't know because his teacher didn't know. Mm-hmm. And it is like the you don't know what you don't know kind of a thing. And I think there is that. How much of our conservatory education was centered around tradition.
Oh, of course.
Well, this is how I was taught.
Yeah.
And now I'm going to teach it to you this way. Well, that includes the canon. That includes which composers. I was taught about this composer, so Absolutely. I'm going to teach you, right? And so I think it's a lot of just no one really means to do it. Well, I shouldn't say no one means to. There are probably some, but most people, I would say, don't mean to exclude it. They just don't know.
Yeah.
They just
well,
don't know.
You just think about it. Why would they know? You think about a conservatory, which is older than the university itself, which that within itself, you're talking about something that's, when you start going back over a century, mm-hmm. It's like you start running into some situations where, of course, they wouldn't champion. How oxymoronic would it be to champion the work of people that are composing, black composers, when, this is, you're talking about way before the idea of desegregation. Mm-hmm. Black people weren't even considered to be, you wouldn't have historically black colleges if there was not, they were birthed out of necessity.
Right.
It wasn't like, we're black, so we want to have this. You wouldn't have the AME church, if there was not a necessity to have that.
Right.
That mm-hmm. It wasn't like black people said, we want to have our own special thing. It's that because we are marginalized and we're not real people in this situation because of how it's old habits die hard. Mm-hmm. And it's all connected to what it was founded upon. It was very much founded, and I'm not one of these people but it's the truth. It's just, you cannot negate the transatlantic slave trade. You cannot, it's all a way thing that start. It would take that much time. It would take 400 years mm-hmm. to get past some of those atrocities and those mindsets. Dr. Joy DeGruy, she's amazing professor of, I don't know if it's like philanthropy, and I know she teaches social justice, and she wrote a book called Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome.
Okay. I haven't read the book, but I know the term.
It's mm-hmm. They got some videos where she talks about, and she's just brilliant. And she talks about basically the cognitive dissonance that white people have, even if it's inherent, they don't know that. Well, the black people deserve that somehow. There's something that's there that and then that they separate themselves from the actions that are taking place. And she also supposes in her book that basically that there's trauma on both sides that was mm-hmm. never dealt with. Mm-hmm. Because why would it have been? Even when the slaves were freed, even when desegregation happened, there was no dialogue. The dialogues and things we're having, it didn't happen. It was there was no therapy to undo or start at least some catharsis for all of that damage and that happened for black people. So black people, we grew up, and my dad telling me, you have to be better than white people. Mm-hmm. You have to be smarter or work harder because the world is going to be against you. Mm-hmm. And I didn't have a lot of that, but he certainly had that conversation with me. Don't play with that because you're a big black dude and you're automatically, and there's some truth to some mm-hmm. things I experienced. And inversely, I don't believe that generations of white people had to outlive some mindsets of their grandparents. Some of them are still alive today. And I know because I see it. And the generation that's coming up, man, those kids are so beautiful, man. Mm-hmm. Now, mind you, they're not interested in like religion or any of that stuff. But when I tell you, they don't get the ugliness that was racism. That unless it's been taught into them, but just right. in general,
I agree.
They just don't. Their hearts are so beautiful. I see it all the time.
I see it too, and I agree that I think I'm optimistic, and I don't think it's going to take us 400 years to heal that because they are learned behaviors. I've actually told the story on a couple different podcast episodes, but we're deep into the show now. So, my daughter, when she was 3. She's 12 now. We're at the playground here in our neighborhood, and there's a little black girl playing in the sandbox, and probably 3 or 4 years old also. And of course, they played for a couple hours and just had a grand old time. And afterwards, she she's 3, so she's just now starting to have full sentences and all that kind of stuff. And she gets home and she's so excited. I was like, "Do you have fun at the park? I made a new friend." Like, "Oh, cool. What'd you like about her? Why is she your friend?" "Well, she had a ponytail like me." Her human instinct was to notice the thing that they had in common. Right?
Yeah.
And then as the world then later teaches us that to find the differences.
Yes.
That's really when I talk about this topic, that's kind of the angle I'm continuing to zone in on. Is like, yes, there are differences, and there are differences in the experience. There are differences in the stories that are told, generation to generation. The black experience is not the same as the white experience, but there are so many things that are the same about us.
Oh, so much.
So many things.
Yes.
And my vision, and maybe this is this is Pollyanna or a little too optimistic or whatever, people could pick on it, but that for me, my favorite kind of social justice conversation is the one that starts at our similarities and then branches out. If we start with our differences, then we tend to go off in our camps. And I don't know, I think that's important, especially when we do work in, these kind of cross-pollinated musical worlds where, if we want to make progress on any of this stuff, we have to do it together.
That's so true. I like the word that you use, it cross-pollinated. That is so true, because musicians, it's inherent that we would be more inclusive and more open and more accepting of one another. I mean, it's not politics. You know what I mean? It's enough divisiveness in so many other aspects of life. It's just intrinsic and natural to want to connect in music and in the fine art. I mean, it's so closely connected to the soul, that it's hard to you have to go out of your way. You got to do extra work to be separatist and sort of. It takes energy.
Yeah. And you don't even have to, kind of going back to the kind of the taking out of certain black stories and things throughout history, and like me not feeling like I got to learn enough stuff at a young age, and also kind of feeling robbed by that. You don't have to hate someone to otherize them. Which I think that's something people miss sometimes too. Like, so if I grow up only reading firsthand stories from the perspective of a white person, I'm going to grow up and see, well, this is my group. And I could like them, but they're another group.
Sure. Right?
Well, I think that's something that, to me, that's human progress over the next 100 years is going to be starting to get rid of that idea.
Yeah.
Like, because ultimately race is a biological fiction. It doesn't really exist. Like, there is no race gene. There are population genes. There are like there are genes that make your skin darker than mine.
Right.
But like, where's that line? Right. There's no such thing as a pure race of anything.
Oh, especially now.
Right now. And I think
this is going to be in 30 to 40 years from now.
We're going to be all beige.
I'm telling you, one of my best friends, Ashley. At my church, he plays bass, and his wife's white. He's black. Cutest little brown kids, little beige kids, and I'm just like, see now, see, right. And I just think that's beautiful, because I don't know. I mean, I just feel like we have to keep moving forward, and we have to keep growing, and expounding, and evolving, and I just think, because I'll really get in trouble. It's on the other side too. You know what I mean? Because then there are black people who have a strong distaste for white people for no reason. That's they don't even know why. Let me say it that way. It's one thing to have because there's a certain generation that I totally get why. I mean, I think we pretty much all do.
Yeah.
But then there are some that there's just like, I believe the character of who you are inside is so important. I know people who are black, who are horrible. I'm not going to just I'm going to love everybody because I'm a lover of people. But if you showed me that you're a horrible person inside, I don't care that you're my brother. Yeah, that's fine. But just, you a jackass, Right. Like, I mean, that's every race has every creed and color, and so that's just kind of, I've never had the mindset of loyalty to one group just because I have my biases like anybody else, of course, because I have my experience that I've lived out. But until you show me that you don't deserve to be a recipient of my regular grace that I give to every human being, now when you show me otherwise, then you get booted into the category. You one of them. But if you show me that you are a decent human being, that you're alive and you're flawed just like me, you're trying to live and make it and family, you want to belong. It's it's not, and it's so natural to be that way. It is unnatural to go through life separating things out and finding things to nitpick and bigotry, all of that. Your daughter said it best. She had a ponytail like me. Mm-hmm. It's so true.
Yeah.
And I feel strongly about that. I really do. I made some dear friends during this pandemic last year that this passion we suffered through. I remember if you remember when Milan it broke out real bad there first.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
In Italy. My friends warned me. One of my friends, Monica, she's like, Isaac, it is bad here. If it's going to be there like it is here, she warned me a week or so before. And I was like, Monica, you're like literally, are you okay? She's like, it is terrible. What's happening in Milano is just a nightmare, which makes sense. I mean, it's when people travel, the trains go down. It makes sense. But I was like, you got to be over exaggerating. She was not. Mm-hmm. Literally the next week or two, it was like when you looked on social media, oh my God, my aunt passed, or oh no, Nana's sick, or pray for my whomever. I'm like, what's going on? Mm-hmm. Literally, it felt time released almost, And I will never forget just that she, and along with other friends that I've met while I'm traveling over there, check on me they won't let a month go by and not call or email me or check in or not to see what I'm doing musically or who I know or what I'm working on. Sometimes, there's that too, but just how are you? The humanity. They don't look like me no more than the man in the moon. I mean, as my friends said, these are the original white people. It doesn't get any more white than Scandinavian white.
Right.
But just as warm and beautiful. My friends in Japan, I'm like, and that just showed me something as humans. You know what I mean? I don't know. It touched my heart, and it helped me get through to where we are even today, because we all went through this complete shutdown. We're still feeling the effects of it. I think we're going to have repercussions. There are going to be little traumas and things that'll have to be psychologically sifted through and whatnot. I don't think we even know the impacts of what we've just lived through.
I agree.
I mean, I don't think we will. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
I don't know that your children will be grown and we'll still be talking about it.
Oh yeah, they'll be telling their kids about these stories.
And so, sure. I think, but you know what? If it took that to get the attention of the world to stop being so, we're a more globalized world than ever before. Mm-hmm. I mean, globalization is a thing, and just even down to how we utilize social media. I think it is so cool that I can stay in touch with people that I was pretty sure that I won't see again before I die. I meet some people, when you meet somebody and you do a clinic or a workshop with 100 people in a choir, 11-hour flight away, you don't go in there thinking, I'll see you next year. I mean, you don't go into that.
Right.
You go into it with a different appreciation, tell me your story, okay, stay in touch, God bless you. If I see you, then great. If not, live well. I mean, literally, I go in wanting to. So social media has allowed me to stay connected with these beautiful people. You know what I mean? Who I otherwise, and so when people get on there and they're all mad at each other and bickering I just think we need to be careful. I think strongly that our human qualities need to take the good qualities need to be paramount. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And I've seen more of that in this pandemic. I've seen us, care for each other a little more, pick up the phone a little more, email, or even just the consideration to listen, because when you're busy, which we all are, you're in your own lane, that's it. Mm-hmm. That you're working on that and you're constantly working, especially in America. We work hard here. We're always working on to the next thing. And so I've taken more time to read books that I'd never read before, to listen to artist music whom I'd never paid attention to, who I knew they existed, but I just never cook new recipes and just try. I mean, because it was uncomfortable at first, man.
Yeah.
First 2 months, a nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
Just an absolute nightmare. Literally, I looked forward to the sun going down every day to say, "Geez, okay, I made it through that day." It's how it felt. Like I was so over it, and so it forced me to recalibrate and then deal with myself.
Yeah.
Do some kind of soul seeking on myself and like, okay, and then even appreciate the things that I had foresight about that I didn't know. So a lot of people, we went virtual, right? The whole world. So you have choirs scrambling and choir directors and musicians and the like, trying to figure out a safe way to stay connected, to share music and whatnot. And then from an artistic standpoint, as an artist, a lot of people were trying to like go do virtual things and having to like try to scrimp together things. And I was like, I got a bunch of music people have never even heard. And I'll never forget, a lot of times I do my videos, like the last 5 years of when I get an idea for a song or when some of my music I want to release. And I'm thinking to myself, I never push it that much. I'll just put it out on social media so people know I exist, literally. And even that can feel weird and gratuitous. So it's kind of like, I don't make a big deal of it. But I'm so glad that I thought to do that then, because now I was able to just, I'm like, because I'm not going to put my people in danger and let's go and sing before it's time. And we didn't for a long time. And so I would just say, well, you haven't heard this song. I put this out to you several years back, so just go look at that video. And I'm so glad I did it. I'm so glad I had that stuff because I didn't do any virtual things with the little squares and that stuff.
Right.
I didn't do that with my group. And it's great. The technology has been great for people that have done that, but it's a lot of editing. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of, and I was like, man, it's enough people that don't even know my canon of music. Let me just send you something I did 5 years ago because you didn't see that anyway. You got on the boat about 2 years ago.
Right.
So go check out, and that's what's happened.
That's great.
Literally, that's what's happened for me, and it's just been a great time of self-reflection. It really is.
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, I could do this all night, but let's wrap this up.
Cool.
With a final thought. So you are, as we discussed earlier on in our conversation, putting a musical label on you just isn't going to work. It's not going to stick. We're not going to get one that sticks up to you. But you do have that tangential relationship to the choral world, and that is where most of my audience is. So if you could give like just maybe a final thought to the choir world that I haven't given you a chance yet to express, even of just like if you had your pick of how the choir world evolves after the pandemic is over, stylistically, how it chooses to outreach, anything really that you think that would be a good little bit of, hey everybody, do what Isaac says. Well, what would you say? What would be your advice?
My first advice would say, do what Isaac says and go buy all of my music online. Download anything I've ever, go down the rabbit hole and just research and download everything, sing my music. No, but really do that first.
Yep.
But then after you've done that, I would say, no, to choir, you are the most special people. We have such a wonderful gift that we share. I'm proud of, first of all say that. I'm so proud of us, of the choral community, specifically ensemble community, because you got the wind ensemble people too, and they like to see the resilience. And I know there's depression. I know there's uncertainty. I know there have been many nights of just frustration, pulling out your hair, having an extra cocktail, doing whatever, I get it. I totally, and appropriately so. But know, first of all, that the response has been tremendous. And that I think there's purpose in what we've just lived through and what we're still living through, because these conversations would not have happened. Mm-hmm. All of the dialogue that I'm seeing happen, that we're experiencing, it would not happen if we did not have the pandemic. I'm just certain of that. It would not, because we're all busy. Every one of us had, we're working towards it. And we had a complete shutdown that made us stop and talk to each other.
Yeah.
And so I would say to the choral world, gear up. because it don't get complacent in this that we are now. Take the good moments, the good things, the technological advances, the new innovations that we have in rehearsal. Don't just abandon them after, like, oh God, now that's over with. Now here we go, page 7. I get it, but find ways to incorporate that, and above all, incorporate the tender hearts that I'm seeing, the hearts for each other, to share music, to program new music, to care a little more deeply about your students, to have a little bit more empathy for this art form. I would say that's what I would say. Keep that, and then start planning now for the next. You know what I mean? With knowledge, all this new knowledge that we've gained, it's like we went away on a planet, and all of a sudden someone gave us the playbook on some different. So we got like an opportunity now. Right. You know what I mean? We can right a whole bunch of wrongs. We can write a new score, if you will. I mean, there's that whatever you want and whatever you see for your programming, for your ensembles, for if you want to commission new work, if you're gonna revitalize old. I mean, there's no reason for status quo.
Yeah.
There's that's just gone out the window now, and I do believe that it's going to be better. I'm a believer that the worst is never what's last. I don't believe that. I think the best is always, the worst thing that you live through is never the last thing. And so I'm just a believer of that. And I think the choral world should celebrate, and plan a party, you know what I mean? With the music that you program, with the way that you connect, with the way that we connect. You know what I mean? I think take the things that we've learned, because that's another thing. Not only are we emotional people, we're smart folks. Just quirky people, you know what I mean? But resilient. And I have learned that in watching this. I mean, it's been astonishing. It's been astonishing to me to see where we are. And so I'm excited. I can't wait till the day where we're talking about this 3 or 4 years. And we're like, y'all remember back when? Oh, yeah. And we'll refer to it almost like 9/11. It will be that. And then I would say, I'm an optimist at heart. And so take that in an optimistic way. And don't squander the time that we have left. I mean, 500,000 people in America have lost their lives. Millions of people around the world. I think we have a responsibility.
Yeah.
And that's what I'd say.
I can't think of a better way to end with the thought of having a choir party.
Yeah, man.
Gotta have a choir party.
I love the idea.
Thank you so much. That
Absolutely,
was really
brother. Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah, man.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of an episode. I always appreciate it, especially on these long haul episodes. But I think if you stuck around, then you were sucked in by Isaac just like I was. He was here at the house until about 9:30, and the kids were in bed down the hall. And like I said, if I were a single guy in my old single days, I could have kept going for another couple hours, and we just would have kept nerding out on all kinds of music things and societal things. But that was a really engaging conversation. So thanks to Isaac for letting us inside of his brain there for a little while. So of course, as you get to the end, always remember it's very helpful when you like, share, subscribe, comment, leave ratings, all the different things that we love it when you do on the podcast. It helps a lot. Hope you're enjoying the show. Thanks a lot for tuning in.